Bore da a croeso cynnes i Pwyllgor Gwaith ar yr unfed ar 20 o Fehefin. Hoffwn atgoffa bawb sy'n bresennol yn y cyfarfod hwn y bydd y cyfarfod yn cael ei gynnal o bell a'i ffrydio'n fyw ar YouTube a bydd modd edrych arno. Gofynnir i chi roid eich ffonau symudol i ffwrdd ac hefyd i roid eich hunan ar mute os gwelwch chi'n dda, oni bai eich bod yn cyfrannu gan fod y cyfarfod yn cael ei recordio. Gofynnir hefyd i chi godi'ch llaw rithiol i fyny pe baich yn dymuno cyfrannu neu ofyn cwestiwn ac yna i roi i lawr, ond yn amlwg yn y Pwyllgor Gwaith bore 'ma gallai weld yr holl aelodau, felly os ydy'n haws i chi codwch eich llaw go iawn er mwyn hwyluso y drafodaeth. Mae gen i 2 ymddiheuriad o ran yr aelodau Pwyllgor Gwaith, sef y cynghorydd Ieuan Williams a'r cynghorydd Meirion Jones. Dwi am fynd o gwmpas rwan y rhestr sgenna i o bawb sy'n bresennol, felly yn y cyfarfod yma mae'r Prif Weithredwr Mrs Anwen Morgan.
Bore da i chi gyd.
Bore da, Mr Dylan Williams ydy'r Prif Weithredwr.
Bore da bawb.
Mr Mark Jones, y cyfarwyddwr swyddogaeth ar swyddog adran 151.
Da.
Ms Lynn Ball, cyfarwyddwr swyddogaeth a swyddog monitor cyngor.
Bore da.
Mr Rhys Hughes, cyfarwyddwr addysg, sgilia a phobl ifanc.
Bore da.
People, good morning. Mr Vaughan Roberts, Director of Social Services. Good morning, everyone. Mr Christian Branch, Head of Regulation and Economic Development. Good morning. Mrs Caris Edwards, Head of Transformation. Good morning. Is Mr Gethin Morgan here as well? Yes, Gethin Morgan, Programme Manager. Good morning. Mr Hugh Percy, Head of Highways. Good morning. Mr Ned Michael, Head of Housing. Not sure if Ned is with us. No. Mr Hugh Jones, Head of Democratic Services. Good morning. Mr Iwan Cadwaladr, supporting Mr Hugh Percy from Highways. Miss Anwen Davis, Head of Scrutiny. Yes, we can see her. Mayren and Anne here are taking the minutes and facilitating the recording, and Adrian and Arwell are here from the translation team, and I think I've included everyone now, and Tudur Jones will be joining us for the final item as well. I think I've gone through all the officers, and as regards the elected members that also join us who are not on the executive, can I welcome Councillor Glyn Haynes, Councillor Brian Owen, Councillor Ken Hughes and Councillor David Roberts. I think I've got everyone who's in attendance. So good morning to you all. So with that, I'll go straight to the agenda and ask any officers or members if you have any declarations of interest to make in relation to any items on the agenda this morning. No? Thank you very much. Move on therefore to the second item on the agenda, urgent matters certified by the Chief Executive or appointed officer, and no urgent matters this morning. Then the third item is the minutes of the meeting of the Executive held on the 17th of May. Anyone willing to propose there a true record? Proposed by Councillor Bob Parry and seconded by Councillor Alan Mummery. I'll go around now just asking for your votes. Councillor Richard Dew, accept. Councillor Robin Williams, accept. Councillor Carwyn Jones, accept. And Councillor David Rhys Thomas. I wasn't in attendance, I don't think. Okay, apologies, thank you for that. Those have been accepted. The fourth item this morning is the Executive's Forward Work Programme. And I'll turn to the officer, Mr Hugh Jones. Thank you very much. As regards the Forward Work Programme before you this morning, the new items we've now updated the Executive Forward Programme up to February of next year, starting with the next meeting of the 12th of July. Item number 3, the Social Services Complaints Annual Report, and then also from the same service, item 4, the annual report of the Statutory Director on the Effectiveness of Social Services, can I also refer to one change for the next meeting, which is item number 5, changes to the Constitution, down originally for today, but moves to the 12th of July. Moving on then to the 27th of September, 2 new items, item 11 and 12. 11 is the medium-term financial review, and then a report by the Finance 151 officer on the consultation on the level of council tax for premium for second homes. Then going on to the 29th of November, item 21, the council tax base for 22-23. Again, a report from the Director of Function 151 officer. And then to finish, the 24th of February next year, item 25 to 27, the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report Quarter 3, to be presented at the time. Those are the changes and additions this morning. Thank you, Hugh. Are there any questions or comments from the members of the executive at all on those items? No, I think it's important that I note here, I don't think I've done it previously, that we meet chairs of the scrutiny committees also, just to coordinate the work streams so that everything happens smoothly like that. Just to make that public, that our work is happening in the background. So that's what you can see, that the scrutiny programme does coincide with the work programme for the executive. So I propose the forward work programme. Do we have a seconder, please? Carwyn seconds. I'll go around again, starting with Councillor Richard Dew. Accept. Councillor Robin Williams. Accept. Councillor David Rhys-Thomas. Accept. Councillor Alan Mummery. Accept. And Councillor Bob Harry. Accept. Thank you very much. We move on therefore to item 5 on the agenda, the scorecard monitoring report for quarter 4. The portfolio holder, Councillor David Rhys-Thomas, is here. Just before we go on, I don't see that the chair of scrutiny is here to give us feedback from the committee. I'm not sure if I can just not see him, just in case, for me to make sure. If the chair is in attendance, is it suitable that I turn to the scrutiny officer? Is that okay? Just to give the officer a warning. So I'll go to Councillor David Rhys-Thomas and then on to Caris and Gethin, and then to the chair if he's in attendance, or I'll turn to the scrutiny officer to receive feedback before going back to the portfolio holder. Thank you, David. Thank you very much and good morning, everyone. Of course, this has been before the scrutiny committee in the past. Once again, I'd like to thank Gethin and his team for collecting all the data and preparing the scorecard for quarter 4, 2020-21. It's important to note that 87 of the indicators are performing well against the targets of green or yellow. Personally, I do think that there's something artificial about measuring performance during a COVID pandemic, because the period has affected us so much as individuals and departments of the County Council. Maybe it's important to look back and remind everyone about this quarter 4 period. It's been one of the most challenging periods throughout the COVID times. All of Wales was in a lockdown level 4 period until the 15th of March, with over 1,000 COVID cases. Anglesey cases were one of the highest across Wales, and on top of all this, we had a large spike of cases in Holyhead, which could have been a catastrophe, but thanks to a rapid response by the County Council, Health Service and volunteers on the streets of Holyhead, this was avoided. This collaboration has been excellent, and I'd like to thank especially to the people of Holyhead for coming together and working together and responding and turning this situation around. Thank you to the people of Holyhead. I'm not going to mention much of the financial issues. Robin can talk about those issues further on, but for the first time for years, things are looking quite healthy from a financial perspective in relation to the budget, and we hopefully will be able to invest in the island in the future. I'm just going to mention a little bit about the recycling. The percentage has gone down a little bit. We were doing excellently before COVID, but that has been affected a little bit. But hopefully we'll be hitting those targets of 70% quite soon. The way the County Council is modernising and using technology, I'm not sure what we call it, a channel shift. The number that ordered and paid for their green bin online, as we expected, gave great pressures on our phone line system. At times there were 3,000 calls a day, which puts pressure on our services. Can I ensure everyone that the council has learned the lesson here, and we are now working and investing to ensure that the phone system will work much better in future. And the good news, Cyswllt Môn will reopen for appointments only on the 28th of June. And very good news also with sickness figures. We are the second best county in North Wales with sickness figures at the moment. And this is, of course, to do with COVID, and that our schools have closed and people working from home and not mixing. Of course, there will be a challenge to keep these figures down in future as we return to the new normal. So to summarise, it's essential that we remember the context of the scorecard for Q4 and the effect of COVID. I'd like to thank all the workers of the council for keeping us all safe and the way that they've worked together and ensured that the services of the council, especially education and social services, have been able to continue through this period has been excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll turn to Carys first of all, and then Carys. Yes, I haven't got much more to add really to what Councillor Dafydd Rhys-Thomas has said, to be honest. Just support what has been noted. And as we say, it's been a difficult period, and we look forward now to see if we have a better period and learn from the experience that we've had during the last period. So with those few words, I'm not sure if Gethin wants to add anything. No, I just agree with what's been said. It's been a very challenging period during Q4. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned for the future, and nothing else to add. Thank you. Okay, can I just also thank Gethin for bringing everything together. Thank you, Gethin, and the team. And Anwen Davies, you had a few minutes of warning. Apologies. Can I ask you for feedback from the Scrutiny Committee as they looked at Q4? Thank you. Good morning. It's a short report from the Corporate Scrutiny Committee in relation to the corporate scorecard for Q4 of the last financial year, and the meeting was held on the 7th of June. There were about 4 points that's summarised by the Scrutiny Committee to present for the Executive this morning. The members noted, first of all, that there was a need to emphasise the fact that the Council had performed very well under circumstances that were very challenging as a result of COVID, and a number of comments were made by the members of the committee to the contributions by the SMT during this period. I wanted to note the appreciation of the Scrutiny Committee to the willingness of council staff to contribute in different ways to their usual roles. There was reference also made to the underspend of the council during the last year, and noted that that in a way was a exceptional situation, again as a result of COVID, but that needed to be kept an eye on, because there was a likelihood that there would be an increasing demand for council services as we prepare for the new normal, and that we need to be careful of that. There was a note also that there were performance indicators underperforming, but noting also that there was a direct result and contribution by COVID to that underperformance. There was disappointment expressed also about the number of calls for the green bin service, and the scrutiny committee wished to draw attention of the executive to that. That was disappointing, and hope that that could be solved moving forward. There was also reference to the significant pressure on the phone system of the council, but in the same manner, the scrutiny committee noted that arrangements were in place to open Cyswllt Môn once again, and that was being done in a step-by-step process and a careful manner. And finally, there was a short discussion also about recycling centres. I'm glad to note that there were arrangements in place by the council to move on to do away with the appointments needed in Penhesgyn, but noting that those arrangements would continue and that needed to be sorted for the Gwalchmai Centre. So in considering all of that, the decision of the scrutiny committee was to note the mitigation measures in place by the SMT and asking you to note their comments, but propose you the report to be adopted this morning. Thank you, Anwen, for you and all the scrutiny committee members for the report. I'm going to go back now to David Rhys to see if he wants to propose the recommendations before opening the discussion. Thank you, David. I'm happy to propose the recommendations. The committee asked to scrutinise the scorecard and note the areas the SLT are managing to pursue improvements to the future, and these are 3 parts. Performance on the whole should be maintained and improved, and those that are under target should implement identified mitigation actions to aid improvements during 2021-22. Secondly, hold a workshop with the SLT and elected members as soon as possible to confirm relevant indicators for inclusion in the 2021-22 scorecard. I'm not sure when that is going to happen. I think it would be good if we could get a date on that. And thirdly, to revise the 21-22 targets to ensure that they are challenging yet achievable, and where targets are affected by the coronavirus pandemic, that these are noted and updated throughout the year. And I'm not sure if I can just add one as well, that the executive can note the thanks to all the council staff for their work during this difficult period of the COVID pandemic period. Thank you. Thank you. Those are the recommendations. We'll go on to a vote on those recommendations. Can I ask the members of the executive now if you have got any questions or comments you wish to ask on the scorecard for Q4? Anyone want to come in at all? Councillor Richard Dew? Yes, just add to the words of the portfolio holder. We all need to thank all the council staff for all the work they're doing over the last year in very difficult circumstances. But as portfolio holder for public protection and planning, I must say there are 2 small teams who have worked very hard during this period in those departments, and we are looking at Q4, and some of those indicators for these departments are amber and red, but this is not true not a true reflection of what they have done during this period. They have worked extremely hard in very difficult circumstances, as I said. But obviously, everyone knows with COVID, we can't go out on sites to do what they're supposed to do. And a lot of work that they have been doing, or that they do, is dependent on going out. So just repeat how well they have worked. And this is not really a true reflection of what the way they have worked. So thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Alan Mummery. Yes, just raise my virtual hand to propose the vote on this, and also to emphasise the importance of that recommendation where we thank the staff. I think we do this sometimes as just something we do, but I think we should emphasise on this occasion the good work that the staff have done throughout this challenging period. And we are more than happy that we add that as a recommendation to the... Thank you, Councillor Robin Williams then. Yes. Talk about steal my thunder, as they say, but Councillor Richard Dew and Councillor Alan Mummery have said what I was going to say already, and just to thank all the staff for all the work that they have done over the last 15 months or so now. It's been an extremely challenging period. I do feel when we look at the scorecard, it's a little bit of artificial under the circumstances that we've faced during the last year. But our heartfelt thanks go out to all the staff that has gone on in every single department of the council, and as portfolio holder for finance, I must obviously thank everyone in that particular department for the hard work that they have done. They've kept everything going and everything on time as well in relation to reports and so on as well. So thank you to each member of staff throughout the council for the work that they've done during the last 15 months. Thank you, Robin. Councillor Bob Parry. Can I just mention the composting and recycling? The problem here is that there was a problem with the waste coming off the roads. I think that has been settled now, and the service maybe will return to the 70% next year. Can I also take advantage of the opportunity to thank the staff? And we have staff here also who don't get enough praise. Those who do go around with the Biffa company, I think it's 4 days of not being able to collect green waste, which happened throughout COVID during the 15 months. And they've worked 2 or 3 in a cab at times and worked with masks, obviously. But I think our debt of gratitude is big to these people for working so effectively. And all the county councils have gone down apart from one, and that's one who started collecting waste every 4 weeks. We're not looking at that, but we've got till 2025 to come back, and I hope today that the public can go to Penhesgyn without booking, but without Gwalchmai, we're still on a booking system at the moment and still closed on Saturday and Sunday at the moment because of lack of staff. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Are there any questions or comments? Just checking the virtual hands in case I've missed anyone. No? No one else wants to come in. So, Councillor Davies, just before we have the vote, I think it's important that we do appreciate that we are still looking at performance, because maybe it would be an easy time to say, oh, we're not looking at that now because of everything else that's going on. It looks that we're mature as an authority, and that we do see the importance of keeping an eye on performance, even though of the challenges we are facing. So I'm glad that we've done that, even though, as many members have said, it is artificial. What it does mean is that our ethos as an authority is to ensure performance during the emergency period also. So I'm glad we have done that, and I agree with what everyone has said with the thanks. There are aspects in the scorecard that we're not doing as well as, but we are performing well in others, and that's lots more than we are not. So we must remember where we are, where the performance is good, and everyone who has lived through this pandemic have also served the council, even though the personal challenges everyone has faced. And my thanks to all members of staff. Those small activities to some maybe have been big changes to the service users receiving those services. David Rhys has proposed the recommendations. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Robin Williams seconded and beat you just, Alan Mummery. So Robin seconds. Can I go through the vote, starting with Councillor Richard Dew? Accept. Councillor Carwyn Jones, happy to accept. Councillor Alan Mummery, accepts. And Councillor Bob Parry, accepts. That report has now been passed. Thank you everyone for your contributions. Moving now to the item number 6 of the agenda, the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, Quarter 4 for 2020-21. And I'll turn to the portfolio holder, Councillor Robin Williams. Thank you. As you've noted, this is the usual Quarter 4 report, the end of year report to monitor the revenue budget, and very different to the years gone by. I'm able to report today that there's been an underspend, significant underspend during 2021-22, and that of course has been as a result of the COVID effects and because of the assistance that has come to local authorities by Welsh Government over the last year. We underspent just over 4 million during the year. That isn't out of step with other authorities in North Wales. Everyone has found themselves in the same situation, and that's in truth because there has been so much support from Welsh Government late in the day during February and March. All of the services have underspent, and I'm sure Mark Jones will be happy to take us through the details of that in a minute. As regards our general balances now, we are looking at balances of 11.6 million in reserves. And I think it's important for me as finance portfolio holder to point out that we are in a strong financial position at the moment, but we have to also be mindful of what we do now during the situation we are finding ourselves in. I've heard many people coming up with a shopping list of what they want to spend this on during the next few months. As everyone in this meeting is aware, there is a process that we follow each year where we review the budgets of each different service every year, and that process will begin over the next few weeks. And each department, I'm sure, will have a list of things that they will need to spend on as we move forward. So we should be careful. We'll look at the different options. We'll look at the different requirements. Not only out of the revenue budget we can finance things, there are grants available to fund different kinds of things, so we can fund projects and so on. So as I say, we should be careful and that we should take things step by step as we move forward. Also, of course, we don't know how long we're going to be during this situation with COVID and what will need to be spent on as time progresses. And is more assistance going to be given by Welsh Government, or has that tap been turned off now? So once again, we'll just have to wait and see. So with those few words, I'll hand you over to the Section 151 Officer, Mark Jones, for his comments. And if you'll come back to me, I'll go through the recommendations. Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin. Yes, to say this is not a usual year, I think that would be an understatement of what happened during the year and the effect that COVID had on the finances of the council. Of course, we are thankful to Welsh Government for the help during the year of paying the additional costs. They paid over 6 million of additional costs and also 2.3 million for loss of income because things like leisure centres were closed and so on. And without that financial assistance, the financial situation of the council would have been much worse at the end of the year. The general balances of the council after the underspend increases to 11.6 million, which is about 8% of our revenue budget net, which is higher than the 5% that we always refer to as the figure we should be transferring as reserves. So as Robin said, there will be a conversation about how we use that money, but we need to be careful because, first of all, we don't know the effect of COVID moving forward during this year and how that will affect our budgets. There will be a need for more services as things start to reopen, and there's a possible risk there'll be an overspend during this year, and that the balances will have to be revisited to fund any over expenditure. The council tax is something which needs, I think, draw your attention to in the report. There is a significant sum which is lower, showing in the report, shows that we are about 500,000 lower as regards the council tax that we foresaw when we set the budget. The council tax budget moves daily, to be honest, as people get different exceptions and so on. But one main thing that has affected the level of council tax this year is the number of houses that have moved over from paying council tax and are now paying the second homes tax to move over to the business rates. And those can be backdated back a year or two. And we have to then give them a back payment. So that has an effect on the level of council tax. So there's a loss of 300,000 to be seen there, or an underperformance of 300,000. So that's, of course, nothing to do with the level of council tax debt. Our council tax debts have increased from about 2.3 million at the end of the last financial year to 4 million this financial year because we've delayed people's payments for council tax as they're on furlough and so on. Welsh Government have given additional money to us in case the loss will be larger than usual because of the COVID situation, and we've kept that money in a reserve account to be used when needed. I won't go through the details of all the different services. The report notes the main reasons why each service has underspent. But as Robin said, this isn't a situation which is unique to Anglesey. Each council has showed in the last quarter a significant change from the figures they were reporting at the end of quarter 3 to what happened at the end of quarter 4. And most councils in Wales are showing an underspend for this year. Just to note also, the accounts of the council have been completed, the draft accounts, and are on the website so people can look at them, and they'll be discussed in the audit committee on Wednesday. Possibly there will be changes as a result of that audit process, and that will possibly change the general balances of the reserves of the council. But with those few words, I'm happy to answer any question from any members on the content of the report. Thank you, Mark. I see Councillor David Roberts is here, and I haven't asked beforehand. Do you want to add anything, David, as you're the chair of the Finance Committee? Yes, as noted, I think between Robin and Mark, I think they've summarised the concerns of the Finance Scrutiny Panel. I think we were just worried about the second homes, and that 200 houses had flipped over to paying business rates. I am aware that there have been 200 houses that have started paying second homes premium, which is also a concern, of course, which means there are less housing in the housing stock. But there is a consultation regarding the council tax premium, which is happening currently. So we'll be responding to that consultation as it happens. Otherwise, I think everything has been noted. Thank you, David, and thank you for the work of the panel as well. I'm going to open it up now to members of the executive for any comments or questions to Robin or Mark. Anyone want to ask anything or make any comments? Councillor Richard Dew? Yes, thank you. No, it's nice to see the report. We have a lot of money in the reserves now, but as the portfolio holder said, we need to be careful. You don't want to go out and spend all that money just for the sake of it and find out maybe next year, the year after, there will be further cuts and we'll be back in the same situation as we've been in the year before COVID, because this year has been an exceptional year with COVID, and Welsh Government have been throwing money towards us really, and this is not going to happen again. So I think we should be careful, and as the portfolio holder said, there will be meetings with every department soon to see where we want to invest in those specific departments. So I think we should just be careful. Thank you for those wise words. Any questions or other comments at all? If I can come in, Klinos, please. I just think the point Councillor Richard Dew has just made there is an important point. We've heard talk of ideas about having 3G pitches and so on, but you know, we have to consider also the assets that we have currently. It would be easy to get to 3G pitch next door to a leisure centre, which is maybe falling down more or less. That we do have assets out there at the moment that need investment. And I'm not saying I'm against things like 3G pitches, but as I've said in my introduction, there are other ways of financing such projects, and maybe just that we might need a contribution to that type of thing, but there are grants and so on available for such projects through things such as the lottery funding and some of the sport associations. So I think it's important that we balance the need to invest in the assets that we have already, as well as maybe thinking of new assets as well. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. The way I thought about it was respraying the car when the engine is on the blink, because the engine won't go the car won't go anywhere if the engine isn't working, is it? So it's very important now that we look in a mature way at the services for the public, because everything we do, it's not done for us, it's done for the public, and we have to do that properly. And Mark, for somebody simple with me, like simple sums in front of me, from what you've said, we've had 8.4 million from the government for additional costs and loss of income, but the underspend is 4.2 million. Is that correct? So that shows to me without the Welsh Government assistance, we'd be in a serious situation. COVID is not going to disappear, and the results of COVID and the effects of COVID are what they will want from us. We haven't got an idea of the pressures on the way for different services. So Therefore, without additional money from the government last year, we would have overspent a lot. So it is important this year that we be sensible, that we don't create headlines and look to be popular, but that we be mature as we have done, I think, since 2017, and to be looking after the public funds wisely. So are my sums there? Is it 8.4 million from additional money coming from the Welsh Government and an underspent of 4.2 million? Yes, that's correct. And without that support, we'd probably have overspent about 4 million. And that's one of the reasons why it's important to carry balances and reserves just in case. We didn't know at the beginning of this pandemic process how much money would come to Welsh Government and how much money they would pass on to each local authority. As it happens, they've been very forthcoming with the money that they've given and given significant financial contribution, but it could have gone another way, that we had to have to spend our own reserves on funding the 8 million in addition that we've had, and that would more or less have taken all of our reserves in 1 year. What we don't know moving forward is the effect of COVID on simple things like leisure centres. Even though they're open at the moment, they're not running at full capacity, and that has an effect on on our income. At the moment, the Welsh Government are still funding loss of income, but how long will that last? There are ways that will change the way people are working and have an effect on fees of our parking, for example. How much income are we getting from our parking areas? Well, Welsh Government won't fund that forever. We'll need to relook at the effect long term of some of our budgets, and having the balances will give us time to make those changes and use them possibly to balance the budgets for maybe a year. And the final thing, of course, is we don't have an idea what will happen to the settlement this year, and we still haven't had any idea from Welsh Government where our settlements will go this year and what their plan will be for funding local authorities for years to come. Possibly because there's just been an election and the government are in place now for the next 5 years, we might get a little bit more assurance for the long term to enable us to plan. And if things do look better, well, then we can look to release some of the reserves for funding additional expenditures if the scope is there for it to be able to do that. Thank you, Mark, for that and for those wise words as usual. Are there any comments or questions before we turn to the portfolio holder to turn to the recommendations? And I also just want to add one recommendation, if you'll agree to it, and I'll say it first, Robin, so that you know. Following what the 151 officer said about the new Welsh Government is in place and that they're there for 5 years, maybe just add the recommendation that a letter goes from the executive to the new Finance Committee Minister to ask that we want a 3-year budget so that we can better plan our services in a more strategic way moving forward, and welcome the new minister. If you, Robin, could just add that recommendation. Yes, no problem with that. Thank you. If you could go through the recommendations then. Okay, thank you. There are 5 recommendations. First of all, to note the position set out in appendices A and B of the report of the authority's financial performance to date and expected outturn for 2020-21. Secondly, to note the summary of contingency budgets for 2020-21 as detailed in Appendix C. Thirdly, to note the position of the Investor Save programmes in Appendix. Fourth, note the position of the efficiency savings for 2020-21 in Appendix D. And fifthly, to note the monitoring of agency and consultancy costs for 2020 in Appendices E and F. And then add to that the recommendation which has just been made by the leader that we write to the Minister asking for clarity in relation to budgets for at least 3 years. Thank you. Is there a seconder to the recommendations? Councillor Bob Parry. I'll go round you as members of the executive for your vote. Councillor Richard Dew, accept. Councillor Carwyn Jones, accept. Councillor Dafydd Thomas, accept. And Councillor Alan Mummery. Thank you everyone. We'll move on therefore to
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Item 7, Capital Outturn Report. And once again, Councillor Robin Williams, thank you. Just like all of the reports that I presented concerning capital, once again, it does show an underspend during 2021. The important thing to note, of course, is what happens is there is a slippage with some of the projects that have been budgeted. And this is something that happens time after time. There's nothing different in this report. So the only difference is that the sum is much bigger this year than I've reported in the past. The reason, of course, is that COVID struck right at the beginning of the last financial year. Nothing happened more or less for the first 3 months because we were in the middle of the original lockdown. And so there was a significant slippage in the projects that had been budgeted for 2020-21. I don't have anything to add, so I'll turn to the 151 officer, Mark Jones, for his comments. But there's nothing unusual in the report submitted to you today, and the good news is that we won't be losing any grants funding that has been agreed within the figures. So we're not likely to lose any money that has been earmarked. So with those few words, I'll turn to Mark. Thank you. The capital budget, as Robin explained, does usually underspend. There are always problems with capital projects. Things might hold us back compared to when we draw up the budget. But this has been an exceptional year, and COVID has had an effect. It's affected our housing developments and working on contracts because a lot of work happens within individuals' homes on the island, so it's much more difficult to do that work whilst maintaining social distance and so on, and between staff working in houses as well. So that has slowed down the spending. There was a lot of work to be done to catch up during the final quarter. We did manage to catch up a little, but we didn't make up that time that we lost during the first 3 or 4 months of the year, especially during the summer, where a lot of our expenditure is incurred anyway. But there were other things that contributed to the significant underspend. School projects, first of all. There's a lengthy discussion before coming to a decision and moving on with projects in Llangefni. Those had been included in the original budget. But the delay in coming to a final decision has had an impact on expenditure during the current year. There was 6.8 million underspent on school projects. The waste contract, we did anticipate purchasing a new fleet for the contract that started on the 1st of April. But due to COVID problems from the manufacturers, we didn't receive all the vehicles by the beginning of the new contract on the 1st of April. So we did receive vehicles worth 2.2 million after the 1st of April. We have now received all of the vehicles and the new fleet is being used for the new contract by Biffa. Other significant items, flood alleviation schemes, they didn't progress due to difficulties with those projects during COVID. That's 1.8 million. There are examples throughout the whole budget of how COVID has had an impact and how it slowed down our expenditure during the year. So the important thing to note is the grants. A lot of our capital budget is funded through different grants. And although we're behind with a lot of the schemes, we haven't lost any grants and they will be transferred as we undertake the work during this financial year. So it's important to note that. And with that, I don't think I have anything further to add. A report, Treasury Management report will be submitted to the Audit Committee and will come back to you in the Executive later on. Of course, the capital side does have an effect on our borrowing and how much money the council has in its bank accounts and so on. So it does have a big impact on the Treasury Management strategy. So we will be reporting on the effect of this and the spend in this report to the Audit Committee and then to the Executive. Thank you, Robin and Mark. Any questions from members of the Executive or any comments? I think it's been explained quite simply to us. So any questions or comments? I think the biggest thing is, and it's the second recommendation, that we won't lose any money and that we do approve carrying it forward. So if not, I'll ask David Roberts to provide any comments from the scrutiny panel. I think Mark has already mentioned our concerns. There is one thing we've asked about before. I'm sorry, we've just had a new dog and he's making a noise in the background. So the question is, with the expenditure profile for the capital budget, does the revenue and capital budgets, do they have to be published at the same time? Because we know beforehand what's in the capital budget. Can't we approve that budget sooner in the year and then we can start the project sooner as well? Because everybody seems to be starting these projects at the same time every year. And I think that might help us. And I think Mark will be looking into that over the next few months. But hopefully before long, we'll have a response to that question from the Finance Scrutiny panel. Thank you to the committee for coming up with that proposal and to Mark for looking into it. So if there aren't any questions or comments, I'll ask Robin to take us through the recommendations. Yes, there are two recommendations. First of all, to note the draft outstanding position of the capital programme for 2020-21. That is subject to audit. And secondly, to approve the carry forward of 11.898 million to 2021-22 for the underspend on the programme due to slippage. The funding for this will also carry forward to 2021-22. Appendix A, paragraph 4.3. The revised capital budget for 2021-22 is 48.053 million. Thank you. Thank you for that, Robin. Will anybody second that proposal? Councillor Richard, do you? Thank you. So I'm going to take your votes. Councillor Carwyn Jones, accept. Thank you. Councillor David Hughes-Thomas, accept. Thank you. Councillor Ali Mummery, happy to accept. Thank you. And Councillor Bob Harry, accept. Thank you all. So that has been approved. Moving on to item 8, which is HRA budget monitoring outturn for 2020-21. Robbie, once again, thank you. Yes, thank you. This is the quarterly report on the HRA, and of course it is ring-fenced, and we can't use the HRA funding for any other purpose apart on our housing stock on Anglesey. It's not surprising, of course, that there is an underspend on both sides of the budget. The revenue budget shows an underspend of 557,000, and the capital budget is 6.140 million, lower than the original budget. We've already heard the reasons for that from myself and Mark Jones, so I don't think we need to discuss that any further. So with those few words, I'll transfer to Mark for any comments he wants to make about the housing revenue account. Yes, thank you. I don't have much to add. The report on the HRA does include the revenue and capital budgets. The revenue budget, the income level is around the budget figure, but the provision for bad debts that we have included initially, we thought that the universal credit might have an effect on the level of debts, although that hasn't happened, but COVID has had an effect. So the provision for bad debts is lower than the budget. So that's what creates the surplus in the income. As I mentioned, maintenance costs during the first lockdown, the service only undertook emergency maintenance work. So that did reduce the day-to-day work, and that did have an effect on our expenditure. There was more spending on aspects of running the estates, items that aren't maintenance, and these are listed in paragraph 6. These are things like pensions, pension contributions, and council tax payments on empty properties, which are exceptional items. So there was a surplus of 8.39, which is higher than we anticipated when we set the budget, and as we mentioned in the previous report, the capital expenditure was lower by around 7.6 million. So rather than using around 7 million from the HRA fund, and we were expecting it to drop to around 1.5 million. What's actually happened is that it's gone from 8.6 million and it has increased by another 1.1 million, taking it to 9.7 million. So that's the balance of the HRA at the end of the financial year. But of course, that funding will be available to fund work in the future to develop new housing. And that plan has started to roll out successfully with a number of new units coming into the housing stock, and we'll have further units coming in during 2021-22 to provide homes to the residents of Anglesey on the housing list. The scope to use the balance to develop new houses, we do have that, and of course we also have the right to borrow against the HRA. And once the balance of the account has run down, we'll be looking to borrow more money to carry on with the plans to develop new housing. I think that's all. I don't have anything further to add. Thank you. Okay, I'll bring the housing portfolio holder in. Alan Mummery if he wants to speak, and then I'll bring in David Roberts from the scrutiny panel. So Alan Mummery, thank you for presenting that report. You know, I tend to look positively at this and the work that has been done. And one thing that has been referred to is, as far as debts are concerned or arrears are concerned, we have seen an improvement. We did refer to the universal credit. We did think that it would have an effect, but arrears seem to be going in the right direction in the moment. And I'm looking forward to the future when we can develop more housing and in different ways, perhaps, so that we can help people starting out. We have so many things in the pipeline, and I'm really looking forward to the future. Thank you, Alan. David Roberts, on behalf of the Finance Scrutiny Panel, do you want to add anything, David? I don't have much to add. We only discussed the revenue and capital budgets, but we did discuss the collection rate, which is relevant, of course. But that seemed to be quite positive, taking everything into account, and Mark has talked about that. But we didn't actually look at the HRA during the meeting of the Finance Scrutiny Panel. Thank you for those comments about income collection as well. So I'll open it up to the executive. Any questions or comments before Robin takes us through the recommendations? The HRA reports are always similar. So any questions or comments? No? If not, I'll ask Robin to take us through the recommendations. Yes, thank you. There's just one recommendation this time. The executive is requested to note the following. The position set out in respect of the financial performance of the housing revenue account for the financial year ended 31st March 2021. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Alan, do you want to second that? Yes, I'm more than happy to do so. Thank you, Alan. So I'll just take your votes. Councillor Richard Dew, accept. Thank you. Councillor Carwyn Jones, accept. Thank you, Carwyn. Councillor David Rhys-Thomas, accept. Thank you. And Councillor Bob Harry. I think Bob's on mute. Yes, Bob's put his thumb up, so we'll accept that as his vote. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, and I just want to make sure that everything's okay with Bob. So this is the Public Service Vehicle Accessibility Regulations 2000, and Bob is going to make sense of that complicated heading. Yes, it is quite complicated, but I won't say much before turning to the officers. But these regulations came out in 2018, meaning that every bus with a capacity of over 22 seats would have to have a lowered floor so that disabled people would be able to use them. They had to have room for wheelchairs and priority seats for disabled people. They have given until January 2022 for us to comply with these requirements. And as it happens, the school bus contract does end next year as well, and they will be re-tendered. We could go out to tender for the contract, but this would mean that there would be a big additional cost on companies because the majority of school buses are old buses. That's the only word I can think of to describe them. They're old. And the majority of them will have to be adapted or changed. We have around 54 contracts with the buses, and we have looked carefully at this. And the only way we see forward until September 2022 is that we don't charge the children who use these buses to travel to school and to colleges, it would mean losing around £66,000 in income by doing this. But on the other hand, we are certain that we will save a lot of money because the bus companies, well, we anticipate that it would cost between 270,000 and 378,000 to the authority to transport children in buses that would comply with the requirements. So by not charging, we are concerned that there are some children who don't use the buses at the moment because they would have to pay. We're concerned that they might start using them. So a team is looking at this and how it will work and how we will manage it. And what's being looked at is to supply a pass and then that the children would swipe them when they use the buses. But I think this is the best thing we can do, to not charge until January, and then after January, we'll just carry on. So if we don't charge, the bus doesn't have to have a lowered floor, so we could carry on. But certainly after September 2022, the majority of these buses will have to have a lowered floor and so on. So I'll transfer now to the officers to give you further details. I think Hugh and Iwan are here. Yes, Hugh is here from the Transport Department and Iwan Cadwaladr, and we have Rhys Howard Hughes from Education. So we'll start with Hugh. But in terms of education, I would like Rhys to speak as well. Thank you, Hugh. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. And just to confirm that this is a joint report between education and property, waste and highways. The portfolio holder has mentioned the main issues. I'd like to draw your attention just to emphasize that we're discussing transport for education for schools only. We had originally thought that this legislation would only be applied to public transport and that it wouldn't include school transport, but it has been confirmed that it includes every bus where a payment is made. So it does include buses where children pay to use that bus service to school. We do have an exception which will be in place until January 2021 anyway. So we're asking for a decision to take us up to September 2022. I would say that taxis are now provided to children with special needs. So we don't think that this would have an effect on the ability of any learner to go to school. And the last thing is that we recommend that we review the situation for just for the next year. It isn't a permanent solution. I think in a year's time, transport will be in a more stable position. So as a council, if we do want to move forward and the prices for providing transport that is suitable for disabled children would be more accessible. Iwan is here as well if you have any questions. Thank you. So Iwan is here to answer the questions. So we'll turn to Rhys, unless Iwan wants to add anything. No, thank you. Okay, we'll turn to Rhys from Education. Good morning. Just to note, as Councillor Bob Parry mentioned, a subgroup has spent a lot of time looking at the options, and this is the best option under the circumstances. I'd also like to say that at the end of the report, it does mention investing in a ticketing system so that we know how many children are on the buses, who they are, and that we have a full list for health and safety and other important aspects. Thank you. Thank you for that, Rhys. Yes, so thank you, both of you. So any questions or comments? I think it's self-explanatory. So any questions or comments? Councillor David Rhys-Thomas. Yes, thank you. I am looking forward, and there is a big cost involved, but there's an opportunity as well to have a new fleet on the island. I'm surprised how many contractors we have. I know there's a cost involved, but we need to look at hydrogen and electric buses, hybrid buses. They will be expensive to purchase, of course, but I think we should work with our contractors to modernise the fleets and to provide charging points as well moving forward with these new contracts. I might be making these comments prematurely, but I think we need to look at our structures. Thank you, David. That's a very valid point. It would be good if the government did come out with schemes to help businesses to invest, especially these businesses who have been hit so hard during COVID. They've lost out on school trips, swimming and so on. So these companies have had an extremely difficult year. Thank you for that comment. Any questions or comments? Councillor Robin Williams, thank you. Yes, just a quick comment. I think having weighed the situation up, I think this is the only practical way for us to deal with this during this year. As portfolio holder for finance, I wouldn't want to see a financial loss, but I don't think there's any other practical way of us doing this. So I'd be happy to support the recommendation on that basis. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Ali Mummery. Yes, just in terms of clarity. I don't think it's the number of contractors we have. It was the number of journeys. I don't think we have 54 contractors, or they've increased significantly. Yes, it is companies. No, actually, that's the number of different transport contracts. We have around 6 companies. Thank you. Just in case people think that we have 54 companies. Okay, thank you for that. So if there aren't any other questions or comments, can I turn to Councillor Bob Parry to go through the recommendations? Yes, first of all, that the authority does not charge a travel fee on Anglesea's non-statutory pupils and further education students for the 2021-22 academic year. Secondly, that the authority limits the right only to the statutory distance for 2021-22. And thirdly, that the Council invest in an electronic system to manage which students qualify for travelling on a school bus. Outlined further in section F, the executive agrees to fund the cards in principle and then to develop a plan during the 2021-22 school year. So I propose the recommendations. Thank you, and I think Councillor Robin Williams has seconded. Yes, I'm happy to second, so I'll have the vote. Councillor Richard Dew, accept. Councillor Carwyn Jones, accept. Councillor David Rhys-Thomas, happy to accept. And Councillor Ali Mummery, agree and accept. Thank you. So we're moving on to item 10, which is exclusion of the press and public, before we go on to look at the regeneration scheme, which is item 11. So I'll just tell you what the public interest is and why we want to exclude the press and public. Disclosure could impact on the commercial interest of a development partner or purchaser of the facility. Disclosure may prejudice the Council's negotiation position. No definite development plans have been finalised for the site, and so information regarding any such plans is not available. The release of internal correspondence could jeopardise any plans which the Council may wish to develop and the potential value of the site in relation to any future proposals, thus affecting the commercial interest in the site. No public consultation has taken place to date regarding the site. So those are the issues in terms of excluding the press and public, just to make sure that the public are aware of those reasons. So will someone propose that we exclude the press and public? Proposed by Councillor Robin Williams, seconded by Councillor Carwyn Jones. So I'll just go around everybody. Councillor Richard, do you accept? Councillor David Hughes Thomas. Is David here? Councillor David Ali Mymry, accept. And Councillor Bob Harry. Yes, I proposed.
Mae'r mwyafrif o fanna yn